China is becoming more aggressive in the South China Sea, and that has many countries nervous. But U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has a message for the Philippines. This is America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. A few weeks ago, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited the Philippines following the Trump-Kim summit in Hanoi, Vietnam. Pompeo's trip to the Philippines, like the summit in Hanoi, served an important purpose: to annoy the Chinese Communist Party. Specifically, Pompeo said the U.S. would back the Philippines in the event of any armed attack in the South China Sea, based on their mutual defense treaty. An armed attack by no country in particular. But for some reason, the Chinese Communist Party was not happy about what Pompeo said. That's why they brought out their most dangerous foreign ministry spokesman, Liu Kang. Sorry, other Liu Kang. Yeah.
China and the countries around the South China Sea are working hard to protect peace and stability in the region. So if countries outside the region, like the United States, really want to consider the peace, tranquility, and well-being of people in the region, then they shouldn't make trouble out of nothing and incite trouble.
Turns out, trouble out of nothing is a bit of an understatement. This is the South China Sea. Trillions of dollars of international shipping run through these waters. It's also home to untapped natural gas and oil reserves. So it may not be too surprising that China claims everything within this 9-dash line, even though there are other countries in the region. The Chinese Communist Party has been taking submerged reefs in the sea and transforming them into man-made islands that just happen to have military bases with missile launchers. That's led to conflict with a lot of countries surrounding the South China Sea, including the Philippines. This is the Scarborough Shoal. It's claimed by both the Philippines and China. Chinese Coast Guard ships have in the past blocked Filipino fishermen from the shoal, and although they've let the fishermen back in the area, they still effectively control the level of access. Just like my terrible roommate Carl controls the level of access to our bathroom. You can't spend all morning in there, Carl. Speaking of not having a bathroom, back in 2016, I sailed to the Scarborough Shoal on a Filipino fishing boat, one that had been rammed by the Chinese Coast Guard only a few months before. This is the boat. I spent 3 whole days on it. Here I am standing on the Scarborough Shoal, attempting to resolve the territorial dispute by planting the China Uncensored flag on it. Sadly, no one recognizes my territorial claims, especially my terrible roommate Carl. Now, the comments by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo are important because he's the first U.S. official to specifically affirm that the U.S. military would back the Philippines in the South China Sea in about 20 years. Yes, the last time a U.S. official stated that the South China Sea was covered by the Mutual Defense Treaty was back in 1999, during tensions with, you guessed it, China. The Mutual Defense Treaty was signed in 1951. It basically says if the Philippines or the United States were ever attacked by a third party, the one would help the other out. But the treaty has language that specified that it applied to attacks in the Pacific. So the question was, did the South China Sea count as part of the Pacific? And that's one reason why, at the end of 2018, the Philippine Defense Secretary, Delfin Lorenzana, called for a review of the treaty. He was concerned the U.S. was too vague about whether they would back the Philippines in a territorial dispute in the South China Sea. He also cited how in 1992, the U.S. military pulled its base out of the Philippines. Soon after, Mr. Lorenzana said, the Chinese began encroaching on territory well within what international law now considers Philippine waters. The U.S. did not stop it. So why did the U.S. pull its base out of the Philippines? Because it was forced to. The Philippine government rejected U.S. plans to renew the lease, so the U.S. had no choice. At the time, there was a popular sentiment that it was time to end an American military presence in the Philippines. Guess who else liked that idea? The Chinese Communist Party. And then they began encroaching on disputed territory. But this month, Pompeo has made it clear what the United States is willing to do in the South China Sea, including defending the Philippines if necessary. But now, Lorenzana is complaining again. This time he has a different concern. That is, a mutual defense treaty goes both ways. So, if the U.S. gets into a fight with China in the South China Sea, that would drag in the Philippines. It is not the lack of reassurance that worries me, Mr. Lorenzana said this time. It is being involved in a war that we do not seek and do not want. So first, he was concerned that the U.S. wouldn't come to the Philippines' aid. Now, he's concerned that the same guarantee could drag the Philippines into an American war. Those are some complicated feelings he has. Basically, he wants to have his lumpia and eat it too. I mean, I can't blame him. Everyone loves lumpia. But this is the dilemma several Southeast Asian nations have. Countries like the Philippines or South Korea have mutual defense treaties with the United States. Some people there don't like the U.S. military presence. But if the U.S. weren't there, the Chinese Communist Party would be the dominant military power in the region. And which is worse? Now, Pompeo's comments are part of a surprising trend. You may have heard that President Trump thinks U.S. allies are making billions screwing us, that the U.S. pays for their defense and they give nothing back. To be fair, that quote originally came from a 1990 Playboy interview, and it looks like Trump's opinions may have changed over the past 30-some years, at least when it comes to the Pacific. As this article from The Atlantic points out, the Trump administration has become a staunch supporter of South Korea and Japan defense, and now it seems the Philippines is solidly included in that. So, what do you think of Pompeo's comments? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more of my adventures in the South China Sea, I put a link to that episode of China Uncensored in the description below. Before you go, you should know that YouTube tends to demonetize our videos when they're too controversial. That's why we rely on support from you guys through the crowdfunding website Patreon. If you support America Uncovered on Patreon, you can also send me questions that I'll answer on the show. Today's question comes from Blue Fox. Chris, what superhero would you be? Well, I think that's obvious. He's super strong, fast, and smart. He's a superhero who defends the people regardless of color or creed from violent forces that seek to undermine our way of life. And that superhero is Agent Smith, but with a beard. Thanks for your question, Blue Fox, and thanks for supporting the show. Visit patreon.com/America Uncovered to contribute $1 or more per episode, and have a chance for me to answer your question on the show. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.